the big story of the week, of the months, and of the millennium is Medhurst's report.
That was explosive. I mean, no pun intended. I keep saying it, but
literally.
literally.
So, and it's wow. My inbox is exploding with people reacting to it, and some of my sources, friends, a lot of people from the US are sending stuff. I would say that 90% they say Sai is absolutely correct. There may be some problems in the narrative. It's a very complex narrative. The way it is woven, of course, there are some non sequiturs, there are some dead ends, there are some things that don't connect. But I know how Sai work. All of us foreign correspondents, we work more or less the same way. If we have a surefire source, we will build a story around what this source is telling us. And of course, we will collect extra sources and then weave our narrative. This is what Sai did this time, of course. He had an absolutely surefire source.
Yeah, he wouldn't have published it otherwise. I mean,
he would not have published it because it's a tremendous risk to publish a report like that if it's not fully backed up. And I'm sure all of us, Ray McGovern, people who worked at the CIA, we are getting returns from people that we know in Washington or that we met in Washington, and most of them are saying, yes, that's it. That's the gist of the story is there. The details it doesn't matter in the end, and it's extremely damaging because it implicates directly not only the teleprompter reader, but of course the toxic Straussian neocon neoliberal con trio, Sullivan, Blinken, and Nuland. I would say that none of us had any idea that they were so implicated in the operational details of this whole thing from the beginning. But that's apparently what it was. In terms of how it happened, of course, Russian SVR, foreign intelligence, they had a pretty good idea. Of course, this was a state secret. There were some balloons at the time in September, and these balloons were pointing basically at MI6 and the Polish Navy, Polish divers, etc. Never the Russians mentioned Norwegians.
They didn't.
So this is something very interesting that we would have to, if we manage to have some in-depth conversations with Russian intel in Moscow or in Russia, of course, and if they would answer our questions, assuming this is not because it's still state secret.
Yeah,
they probably had information about the Norwegians, but they decided not to disclose it. So this is also very the interest is parallel to the fact that Sai doesn't even mention MI6.
He doesn't. I was surprised because we invented this kind of sabotage.
I was very surprised about that. There must be a very serious reason. And it's not that MI6 was not part of the whole thing. Probably Sai could not 100% confirm their role in the whole operation. And of course, Sai is very meticulous. He will not print something that he doesn't have at least a lateral confirmation.
Right.
I mean, so we can trust him on that.
His past stories and accolades, the
everything,
Abu Ghraib,
everything.
It speaks for itself.
His reputation speaks for himself, and his reputation is unrivaled.
Yeah,
among all of us, foreign journalists, correspondents, etc. Sai is the holy grail of investigative journalism. There's no question about that.
Yeah,
but he said that he spent 3 months working on this story, which is a lot.
It is.
And basically, he, I don't know if he traveled to Denmark, Sweden, or Norway. I think the whole research was inside the deep state with his absolutely fabulous carnet d'adresse. He knows literally everybody, from different administrations, and for the past 50 years on top of it, So
yeah, exactly. So, this goes back.
So we can retrace his steps and how he built the story. So there are some serious problems. We have to talk about that, as much as we admire Tsai.
What did you find was not adding up, or you found was a problem?
The fact that the CIA gets away too lightly. That's not how it works. I'm sorry. Okay, the first part, the conceptualizing, the Straussians, the meetings between State Department, National Security Council, etc. Right. But when it comes to the CIA and the fact that, well, William Burns was involved, but apparently, according to the narrative, reluctantly. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure about that. And obviously, Tsai doesn't get into details on the real role of William Burns in the whole thing, current CIA director, who actually is one of the few CIA operatives who actually knows something about Russia.
Right, he was ambassador at one point to Russia.
He was an ambassador, so he does know something about Russia. Like the Ray McGovern already, he spoke about Burns. He said, yeah, he's competent in what he does. So, considering the level of stupidity in the whole United States government at the moment, especially because of the neocons and neoliberal cons, that is like saying the guy is Wittgenstein, Well, anyway, and there was something that I don't remember the exact phrasing, but this was being concocted and organized even before the Russians sent those letters to the Pentagon in December 2022,
right,
when they were asking for indivisibility of security discussions between Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and Russia. So the plot started let's say maybe in the fall of 2021.
That's how it sounds, and I wouldn't be surprised.
That's how it sounds. So that would explain, at least partially, the fact that the Americans didn't even bother to answer the Russian letters, which were extremely serious.
Yeah.
Many of us published extracts of the letter. And of course, the Russian Foreign Ministry wrote extensively about the letters. Putin mentioned the letters many times in his speeches in December, then in January. So, okay, they were already, their plan A was already, okay, let's blow it up. And of course, considering they are not very bright, this lot is not exactly very bright, no? The neoliberal con lot around the teleprompter reader. And obviously, they telegraphed that they were going to do, and afterwards, they telegraphed that they did it. On top of it,
Newland and Blinken.
You remember that, Richard? They're not very bright. You don't.
They're not.
If you do a high risk covert op like that, you're mum forever. That's how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Mum's the word. Yeah, you don't tell anyone.
And in fact, some of my friends from Washington sent me an email today. Look, these cycles, they are doubling on a really bad hand, and every time that they double, it gets worse.
Yeah, I'm torn between, is this stupidity or is this, they're trying to be provocative on purpose? Because the funny way that Tsai kind of negotiated this was that, well, they were the CIA took this and the divers took this as a signal where Biden said we're gonna,
right.
Yeah, and it's so funny, it's so American, right? Like, okay, we can make it covert because now Biden said it on TV. It's so laissez-faire.
And that's one of the fragments of the narrative, Richard, which is he could have. I understand why he had to be concise, and he had to get the main aspects of how the operation was built. So I'm sure he had to sacrifice in his final editing at least half of what he originally wrote. This is what we all do.
It is.
That's how it is. Unfortunately, maybe he could do a remixed greatest hits version later on. His original copy, which would be obviously fascinating.
We would love to read that. For
plenty of detail that all of us will be dying to read. In fact, but it's a pity because this accounts for some of these loops and some of these. Gasps of air, so we are trying to breathe it coming to the surface in the middle of the narrative.
Yeah.
But the narrative itself, the fact that extremely serious people in Washington, in New York, transatlantic, finance people are saying, look, that's it. Basically, the narrative stands from beginning to end with minor details. So this is very sad. And the fact, of course, that Psy is being smeared, degraded.
Did you see this blowback from them?
Yes, I saw some
it's
of
ridiculous. They're saying it's fiction, and they always say this. They say this every story he does.
He's a blogger. It's like he has no credibility. It's a conspiracy theory. The usual shit of people who have an IQ much lower than room temperature, which is the case with all these people.